It was supposed to be a good morning, but apparently we are running way beyond time and it's got a good afternoon. Welcome to this session, which is parenting. So I've kind of actually progressed. Yesterday, I was I had the privilege of moderating a session on young parents. So today it's parents. Thank God they didn't put old parents. Welcome to this session. I know we are running late. We'll try to get it on time. Apparently it runs from 12 to 1:20. We'll try to keep it on time. My panelists, let's be aware that lunch awaits, and hungry tummies become mean minds. So let's not get there. I want to start off with recognition of it's not an international day, but it's at least a world day. It was World Kindness Day yesterday. How many of you know that it was Kindness Day? Or do even they have something called a Kindness Day? Great. We need to have more hands the next time when we meet in 10 years, apparently. These meetings happen every 10 years. So before we start, maybe a 30-second pause in terms of think about one act of kindness to a child. It could be your own child or a child's act of kindness towards yourself. 30 seconds, just think about it. Think hard, because randomly, I'll just pick on one of you, including the panelists, and say, what was that act? So, 30 seconds. An act of kindness to a child, or vice versa. All right, thank you. I have a bit of housekeeping to do because I always mess this up. So this session is organized by the Interagency Consortium, the global initiative to support parents. How many of you knew something like this existed? Except for the people who are part of it. All right, those hands quickly go down, all right. Consisting of UNICEF, WHO, Early Childhood Development Action Network, the Partnership to End Violence Against Children, and Oxford University. Right? So I'm sure they have a website. In interest of time, they gave me things to say about them. Hey, we have Google now. Go check it out, what they do. And I think they do some really great stuff. Join the network. Join the movement. Now, what we're going to have is slightly different from what we have had in many of the sessions. We're going to have a 10-minute or 12-minute. We negotiated. He paid me about $100 for that extra 10 minutes. So he gets 12 minutes to make a presentation, Ben Parks from UNICEF. And he will kind of lay the ground in terms of the discussion. And then today we have a very distinguished panel. It was a moving target, but with moving targets, we end up with a great target. And so we have two ministers, I think. We have three country representatives, Brazil, Indonesia, and Malawi, across the world. And then we have two experts from two foundations, and Ben from UNICEF. So without any ado, Ben, I'm going to be a tough timekeeper. You negotiated 12 minutes, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I paid for.
All right. Okay, you get 12 minutes from now.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, moms and dads, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping my presentation will come up here. Yes, it has. I'm speaking today as a UNICEF guy, works on global advocacy in New York, but I'm also speaking today on behalf of the Global Initiative to Support Parenting, which was just introduced. And before coming halfway around the world to talk about parenting, when I spoke to it with my wife, she said, it's fine by me as long as you somehow shoehorn our new son, Noah, into the conversation. And it's also very pertinent because it's difficult to talk about global outcomes in parenting, because parenting is so personal to all of us. Every child is unique, every parent is unique, and the relationship between them is unique. But we have learned so much from science at the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, pedagogy, and health about the universal things that represent themselves as opportunities, as promise for that relationship to be the most powerful driver of a child's development and the best protective factor in their lives, but also the risks. And often the conversation about learning is skewed a little bit towards the wrong end. Public perceptions about investment and engagement and which are the most important moments and milestones on a child's learning journey are often considered in public perception to be towards the end of childhood, to be secondary education and higher education. However, the economics tells us, and you would know this as the Heckman curve, that in fact investing in preschool has a better return than investing in other education areas, but that parenting, the parental home from 0 to 3, even before the child is born, is the most impactful learning environment for the child. And it's not just the economics that tells us that, it's also the emerging brain science. Because when we look at the development of higher cognitive function, when we look at learning and language acquisition, and we look at sensory development, the most critical, most rapid period of growth is in these early years of childhood. It is powered as a precondition by children feeling safe and loved. Children have a biological imperative to connect, have a deep connection with a parent for safety, for learning, and for love. And when it's not present, they interpret it as threat. And that prevents them from learning, and it affects their development. Children, in some studies, are suggested that children ask 100 questions an hour by babbling or by pointing, and later on by language. And it is the response of the parent to those cues that power the intellectual, social, emotional development of the child. This is something that Harvard Center for the Developing Child call serve and return, which you all know as a tennis term. I'm going to introduce a short video from Professor Ed Trownick of University of Massachusetts, just to show how this works in practice, but also what happens when it's not present. I hope the video works.
Baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
So when I present that video, I sometimes get asked, is that really hard on the baby and the mom? And of course it is for a minute, but it's in the context of a loving, nurturing attachment. the child has a sense of belonging and safety. And having stress is a part of childhood. But when emotional neglect is something the child lives with all the time, or violence, or, I've lost my thing. When the child lives with, I hope that will come back because I wanted to show you another slide, but when the child lives with adverse childhood experiences such as emotional neglect, violence, alcoholism, addiction in the home, things that disrupt the biological connection between a parent and a child, it creates toxic stress, another Harvard Center for Developing Child term, that disrupts every aspect of child development. And we used to, for some reason, think this was just a marginal issue on the fringes of society. We now know very clearly from research across disparate, different types of countries all around the world that almost 60% of adults recall having one adverse childhood experience, and around 13% recall having 4 or more. Classrooms in some parts of the world, then, if you give a point for every adverse childhood experience, they would look like this. And often when I present this slide to parliamentarians, they say that doesn't happen in our country, but when I go and present it to teachers in the same place and preschool educators, they say that's my classroom, and that the trauma is an obstacle to learning. And what we see, the more adverse childhood experiences that happen, the worse the life outcomes are across almost every single indicator. This is a composite 40 indicators: poor mental health, poor physical health, addiction, obesity, vulnerability to violence, vulnerability to crime, from the Center for Disease Control in the United States, showing a stepwise increase in vulnerability to those things throughout the life cycle, dependent on the number of adverse childhood experiences. And the cost of that is about 8% of GDP at a very, very conservative estimate. So we have talked about the promise and the opportunity and the possibility of parenting, but we also have talked about the risk. How can we make universal, all over the world, a situation that optimizes the promise for every parent and prevents the risk for every child? Of course, we would ideally live in a situation where there was full parental leave, affordable childcare, universal access to preschool education. But there's one additional, very doable intervention that has got amazing evidence having an impact on promoting nurturing care, playful parenting and learning, and breaking the intergenerational transmission of trauma. And it is parenting programs, often delivered through home visits, sometimes in group sessions, but parenting programs that provide skills and practical understanding of child development and child development milestones. And what we see is over 435 randomized control trials have now shown the massive impact, game-changing impact of parenting programs in terms of learning. When you look at the top, the improved children's cognitive, language, and social emotional development, imagine how much that could drive our efforts to end the learning crisis at this earlier stage in childhood. We also see impacts in terms of reducing harsh parenting and neglect. And when we look at what's included in parenting programs, in general, the evidence shows that these type of components are the ones that work. Parenting programs focus on the interaction between the parent and the child, communication and play, remembering that play is the serious business of children and drives learning, especially at this age. They support parents in managing stress and self-regulation, which is enormously helpful, particularly for parents who have been affected by adverse child experiences. And at the very bottom, maybe it should be at the very top, they promote love, attachment, and they give the child a sense of belonging. Remember at the beginning we talked about the biological imperative of love for every child. If we look at a delivery system for parenting programs, we would have these different elements in a perfect situation. At the bottom, you see countries trying to change the conversation about parenting and to increase awareness and understanding about risks and promise. You see integration of parenting programs into the health system, the education system, the social work system, community-based organizations, whichever is most appropriate for that particular society. As long as the programs are evidence-based, then they will make the difference. Home visits and group-based approaches are known to be the most effective. We're learning more about how we supplement them with harnessing the power of digital technology and apps. And could we imagine a situation where low-tech apps are available throughout low and middle-income countries for every family? And finally, at the top, intensive intervention and support for particularly vulnerable families. I live in the state of New York, and in New York, the focus of parenting programs currently is very much at the top here on those who are most vulnerable, but we would like to see them universal. This is the GISP. It was presented earlier on. The role of the GISP is to advocate in every corner of the world for universal access to parents, to support governments and organizations and community-based bodies to get hold of the science and the knowledge and the solutions to make it work, to bring together the research and to help us take this to scale. We have some key principles. Everything we do is based on sound evidence. It is open source. The solutions need to be low cost to make them truly universal. And we work on the basis of partnerships and sustainability. Because I've come to my time, I've stolen this slide from my colleague Nadine Burke-Harris. Some of you may know her. We did a launch together of a policy paper in New York last year. And the thing was about the doability of parenting programs. 30 years ago, only 20% of the world's children, 40 years ago, sorry, 20% of the world's children were vaccinated against the 5 major childhood preventable diseases. Through advocacy and partnership, an audacious ambition, 80% of children were vaccinated within a decade of focused effort, and this reduced child mortality by 60%. Imagine if our generation, imagine if in our time, we could all come together to make parenting programs universal. Imagine how much we could increase learning opportunity for every child, and how much we could break the intergenerational cycle of trauma. I hope you will all come with us on this journey, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. You went actually to 13.3, but time went by, and I didn't realize it. So another round of applause for somebody who can keep us enjoyed it. Now, so Ben, you know, one of the things that really came out is the role of emotions right from the start when you showed that slide. It really had an impact, and it's something that we tend to really put to the side in terms of how emotions play such a big role in it. Now, what I would like to do today is to structure this discussion rather than just have each of my speakers speak for 10 minutes or so. I'm going to throw a curved ball to all of you. You're going to structure it along what I would call a 3x3 matrix. So on one side, it's going to be, and I think that Ben missed out one thing. I love pointing out when they miss out something, and he might say, no, I didn't, but I was not given that authority. But I think you missed out the stage where the prenatal stage, from conceive to the birth, because I think there's so much research which says that that already has an impact on the child, just not on brain maturation, but even the way the cognitive aspects are already there. So I think we want to do that. And when I saw the declaration, it says from birth. Guys, we need to change that. We need to change it from prenatal, from the time it's conceived. The parent needs that support. And I urge all of you to put that suggestion into that declaration. So that's one stage. Then we have the birth to 3, which I think neuroscientists also say is a distinct age, where you have also classified. And then the 4 to 8, which then falls under the ECCE umbrella. Now, what's the other vertical? And this I was given as marching orders by the organizers. Why? And I think Ben has put a very strong argument. And if nobody understands all the neuroscience and the cognition and all that stuff, hey, $7 trillion. What was that percentage of GDP you mentioned? 8% of GDP. All right, that's huge. We have done a study in terms of socio-emotional contributions to GDP, and we found them running into 15 to 20% of untapped. So it's huge. Now, the second is what? And you mentioned a lot of those mechanisms and dimensions on what. So I will try to get from our country representatives along these 3 lines, as well as from the founding agencies, and then the how in terms of the structural platforms. And I want to focus here on what many have said is an intersectorial approach. Many different divisions are involved. And as one working in the UN for some time, we find that then there's nobody accountable for it at the end of the day. It was, well, they did, or it was them, and it was them. And so do we need to have some central platform where it gets the priority? This is what's needed, because this is our future generation. And this has to be a top priority. Maybe a special committee at the Prime Minister's level or the President at the highest authority, maybe, I don't know. That we hope we'll get out of this discussion from the experiences of our panelists. So let me go around the panelists. I'm going to maybe make a mess out of it. Now, I know Anita Anastasios is from here. She's from Lego. I got that right. Everybody knows Lego Foundation, so she's not from the company, but she's from the foundation. So they do the good stuff, but hey, Lego does good stuff all the time. So then Nathan Koblenz from Porticus. Go check them up on Google. Then we have Eduardo from Brazil. I'll let you all introduce yourselves a little bit more on what you do and stuff, but maybe 30 seconds or so. Then we have Dr. Patricia Anikariat. Did I get that right? Okay, I passed that. She's minister from Malawi, and I have been given the country notes from Indonesia, Dr. Vina Adriani. Welcome. So, based on Ben's presentation, let me start off with, and I'll use first names if I might. Patricia from Malawi, tell us a little bit about the why, the what, how, based on whether it's during the prenatal stage or the consumer, before when the child is in the womb, then when the child is to birth to 3, and then from 3 to 8. Maybe about 2-3 minutes, because I want to have discussions and dialogues. All
right. Thanks so much, the director, the ministers, and the professors, and all my senior present in this event. You know, I'm so much pleased to be part and parcel of this parenting event. The director, the whole conference which we are having here in Uzbekistan, this is the biggest function, and maybe it might be the only function which is covering the whole conference of parenting. And when you talk about the early childhood development, it comes all the way from the parenting for conception, from birth up to 8 years. And science reveals that whatever we take through our children in the early years contributes to what type of a person or what type of a child is going to be in later years. If at all we are having the abusive wives and husbands, it's because maybe they missed up somewhere in the 1,000 days of our children. And what we are supposed to be doing now is to train the parents how to deal with their children, what they speak to them, and what language they give them, and what type of life they give to the children. As the Minister of Gender in Malawi, we have a number of interventions in the parenting programs, but because some of the parents, they might not even go through whatever we are talking about, and because of that, though the first days we take the households as one of the infrastructure, and also the learning materials, the teaching and learning materials that are locally within the house setup. But because some of the parents, they don't even know what to do about this, that's why we have a separate infrastructure where we build and where the children that are supposed to be parented and taken to as preschools. And because that's why the conception to birth, that's why we keep saying that couples should not even speak to the children loudly. At the end of the day, the children, they'll cope up, thinking that that's the way how to live. But also, we need not even to shout to each other. We need not to fight in the presence of the children. At the end of the day, they'll cope and keep saying, this is how we are supposed to be living in a family setup. And having all those problems, that's why we keep training the mothers as well. We have training of our mothers. These are the best and the first caregivers, apart from the caregivers whom we have, which we train as a ministry, but the parents are the first caregivers. That's why they are the ones who nurse the children in the hospitals. And knowing that some of the parents, they don't know, that's why we are constructing also ECDs in the hospitals, so that, especially in the referral hospitals, where we have a number of children with their parents when they're nursing some of the sick people. And we would like to see that these children are supposed to be in a classroom where they can also be socializing. And the parenting is also one way of reducing the mental health problems which we're having in the country. The parenting is also one way of reducing the early pregnancy and early marriages which we are experiencing in the country. And the parenting is so important also for the positive cultural practices which we need to tell and parade our children. The parenting also helps what type of food we give to our children. And there are some of the children whom they feel also so reserved. It might be that maybe we haven't even socialized them. They've never been with a number of groups of children. And this is what we are also constructing even preschools in prison. We are working hand in hand with private sector to construct preschools in markets that the children should not be with their mothers at the back when they're selling their drop scones or tomato, whatever. They've got to be socializing with some of the children who are in the preschools. So we've constructed some preschools in the country, a number of those, and we believe in that the preschools are going to help us in the enrollment of our children in the primary school, because they're so clever. They will like education because they know they've been socializing. They will not even like to be home alone without even having friends. And because we parade our children into the ECDs, they're able to finish education. They're able to be at tertiary education at a tender age, be it at 15 years. You find that our children are in the universities because we paraded them from day one in these preschools. So there are a number of areas which we need to look into it. We need to all realize that we cannot even talk about child development without parenting. And as a program, parenting is strengthening the capacity of parents to better care of newborn children, meet nutrition needs, respond appropriately to the care of sick children, but also prevent accidents, adhere to immunization, as to what UNICEF has said, that we need to do that to our children. But also growth and development of children are much dependent on the proper care as well as support from parents and also caregivers. The director, we need also to have positive parenting which assists children to grow and develop holistically. This means children develop emotionally, physically, as well as cognitively, spiritually, as well as socially, in how we present ourselves to our children. And that's how we train also the caregivers. From the parent perspective, after the conception and the birth, then from 6 months to 5 years, we take them into the ECDs. Then we transit to primary school at 6. But also if he's a quick learner, then we take that children even at 5 to primary school. So we train also the teachers at the primary school so that they've got to know where we've stopped and where they're supposed to take them from.
Where would be your main challenges that you have faced over this period? Now, before you answer that, do you have any programs for the pregnant parents?
Yeah, because we coordinate with the Minister of Health, so we have programs for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where would be your main challenges that you have faced? You mentioned outreach in terms of knowledge of the programs, getting access to the programs. Do you have some kind of a workforce or a, it comes to my mind when the World Bank initiated the whole green revolution and stuff, they had this massive outreach network. Maybe, do you have something like that in Malawi in terms of making sure?
The problem which the challenges which we're experiencing might be infrastructure, but also the training of the caregivers as well as the parents. Yes, we thank UNICEF Malawi, who are really doing a lot, but also the World Bank in terms of infrastructure, but knowing the population of our children and the campaign which we are having, that each and every child is supposed to go through ECD before going to primary school. So those are some of the problems, because we believe in that the first ECD is the home. But now some of the mothers are busy, they cannot even take care of the children, taking them through whatever. Then we parade them into the ECDs where we're looking forward to have a lot of infrastructure.
Thank you. Let me jump to Brazil. Something very similar in terms of what your challenges are based on those 3 time spans. And then in terms of not why, I think we already know why, in terms of what you have and how you deliver that.
Hi, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm Eduardo Quiroz. I'm here by the invitation of ECDAN, where I'm one of the board members in the team as a volunteer board members. What I want to say a little bit about Brazil, seeing the presentation that we saw it, is the challenge that we had in Brazil. I used to run a foundation in Brazil for early childhood development for 8 years, was that nobody understood what we were talking about early childhood development, parenting, or even the importance of early education. People don't really realize. And what we did in Brazil was something that the Center on Developing Child works a lot with, is we started to translate the science. Most of the people here probably are that what I call from the church of ECD or early education. We probably have some people from the political side that also they are already convinced. But the majority of the people, if you go to your country and go to the streets, they don't know what we're talking about. They don't know the importance of what we have to do with children and how we have to build the capacity of the teachers. And what we decide to do in Brazil, at this foundation that I was working for, and other organizations, in partnership with the Center on Developing Child, the Frameworks Institute, we start to build and to translate the science and build the capacity of our leaders, politicians, journalists, judges, and it really started to work because we have to create, if these people understand, they start to create the offer of programs and projects. And because the population, we don't have the demand from them if they don't know what they need normally. And we really changed the game in Brazil. In the last 10 to 15 years, we have nowadays the largest home visiting program in the world. Maybe it's not the largest, but between the 3 largest home visiting programs. We have states that Nathan's going to talk about, Nathan from Portugal. We have programs in states where we have parenting programs, apart from formal early education programs with building the capacity of teachers, but we have home visiting programs in the states and also in cities. Cities are also doing home visiting programs, all in alliance with the federal government.
Just a quick interruption. When you say home visiting programs, so these are professional experts who have been trained supported by the state, taxpayers' money, and is part of the institutional structure, or is it primarily private?
Yes, they are professionals. This is one of the big challenges because even when you build the capacity of these people, it's really hard because the pay is low, and you cannot get people that are very like nurses to do this kind of job. Because when you scale up, it costs a lot to get nurses to go to home of the people, to visit the people. And you normally get people with less education to visit. And you got a bigger turnover among these people that are visiting. This is one of the big challenges, but yes, it's people supported by cities, states, and the federal government. Normally the federal government sends money to the state that sends money to the municipality.
Well, I think it's a space where the private sector or foundations can play a role. But I want to quickly jump to Ben. You're not going to sleep yet, have you? So you showed the 7 trillion in terms of the, I'm assuming it's a net benefits that they have calculated. Would they have taken into consideration these costs of implementing such a program to get those benefits?
I'm not sure, I think the microphone's working. Well, the estimates are very conservative to begin with. They don't account for all of the things that are lost when parenting opportunities are lost. And we know that investing in things like home visits, even parental leave, and the other things needed in early childhood are a fraction of the costs we pay. And there's very sound evidence on that.
That's what I was assuming. And I think that, once one puts that up in a very... So Eduardo talked about science and evidence, which I think one of your presentations that, RTCs, but they're very costly, aren't they? So one would have to source RTCs as well. But the final results tend to say, let's do this because it makes economic sense. One shouldn't base it on economic sense. It should be social in the broader social sense. But unfortunately, we are caught in that for a while. Nathan, I'm going to come to you because you guys have dabbled in Brazil, and Eduardo referred to you. Tell us a little bit about your experience, maybe with this home visiting programs, because this is basically something with like what we are talking about in an outreach program.
Sure, thanks, Anantha. So just to introduce myself, I'm Nathan Kublintz. I work for an organization called Porticus. I lead our work in early childhood development, which for us means the full span from 0 up to 8, but not before 0, unfortunately, Anantha. So for us, we're always grappling with this issue of how do you combine this efforts around reforming formal education and also support for parents as well. I'll give a very, very brief example that Eduardo touched on. This is in the state of Ceará in northeastern Brazil. So building on that kind of momentum that Eduardo described around making the case for why ECD matters. What happened in Ceará about 4 or 5 years ago was this push to prioritize early childhood development. But the state took a very collaborative and consultative approach to working out what should the priorities be. And they ended up with two kind of strands, one on reforming early childhood education, so pedagogy, curriculum, learning environments, assessments. But the other strand was on supporting parents and children in their home environments. And so as all of us know, like this is very typically 2 different ministries, or sometimes more than 2 different ministries, sometimes called the Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Women and Children, who have the role to deliver those kind of home visiting programs. And then the Ministry of Education, which takes care of the more formal education. What was very different in the approach that Ceará took was to have a very strong coordinating mechanism for the 24 municipalities in which they piloted this. So again, this consultative, collaborative approach, and then a strong coordinating approach with that as well. The idea was to come to a kind of consensus around when those children end up in their first day or their first year of formal schooling, as the Minister of Malawi was describing from her experience, what are the capacities they need to have? And so how do you build in those capacities from the parenting side as well as the kind of the input from the education side? one other aspect just to add to this. So parenting programs, the kind that Ben described, were one aspect of the support for parents, but also assistance to try to remove some of those very practical blockages that prevent parents from providing those relationships. Food insecurity, violence in the communities. These aren't things that they're not because they're bad parents, it's because they're unable to provide those nurturing relationships. So how part of this work in Serie was how do you remove those obstacles so children can receive those relationships when they end up in the classrooms, they're on that trajectory.
So would you think that, okay, we have support to parents, they live in these very, very difficult conditions. One of the things that we are really ill-equipped, and our school systems don't build that, is this rubric of socio-emotional competencies, emotion regulation, self-awareness, and so forth. Do any of the programs, and I put this across all the three representatives from the countries, in the parenting programs, do they have formal socio-emotional learning programs, and what kind of indicators that they kind of use to sort of say, have they succeeded or not? I'll start, Nathan, just to continue with that line of line of thought, and then I'll go straight to the three, very quick, yes, no, and then I want to pick Anita's brains. She's been quiet, and we need to pick the Lego blocks out there. Nathan, very quick, and then...
Sure, very quick is yes. So those social emotional outcomes were at the heart of this. So it's a strong yes for Brazil.
Patricia? Yes, it is. Indonesia? All right. Eduardo, you're nodding?
Yes, for sure. Yes, like Nathan just said, it's the base for everything, for the whole program.
So we're going to come and do a kind of a check after this sessions and going through the policies and see if it falls under socio-emotional or not. And of course, the outcome will be have they got kinder brains? Yeah, because that's the final thing, isn't it? If it's a kind parent, you get a kind child. Okay. Anita, in some of the work that's been done, and then I will definitely go to Indonesia, Vina, when I will ask you from Indonesia's experience. So a bit of patience, but Anita, please. Lego.
Is there a question? Sorry.
In terms of what your experience, well, tell us a little bit about, when I've heard Lego Foundation, my first is, what are they doing? Why are they there? They build blocks and for kids. So with the parenting, are you getting them to build blocks as well and do Lego blocks? And how does that build some of the competencies? How does that support parents in bringing up the kids? And whether in the same matrix, pregnancy, the first three, and the following four.
Yeah, I can't really talk to Lego as the company, but I know it's adults are the most growing market for Lego. You can see it in the sets, etc. And that's why it's, in some ways, it's a great thing, right? Because a lot of parents are now playing a lot more with their children. I would say, I think, first of all, let me just introduce myself. My name is Anita Anastasio, and I lead our early childhood development portfolio that focuses on what we would call stable settings, although nowadays there's nothing stable anymore, and also humanitarian settings. And a big focus for me has been on humanitarian settings, so parenting in crisis situations. And I want to speak to that because I think it's something that we often forget in this room. Ben talked very clearly about the adverse experiences that the most vulnerable children have. And I think part of the fabric today is that crisis is the only constant, really, in our changing times. We see political polarization, we see climate change, we see war, displacement. And I think it connects all of us, I think, even more so. Noor from the Moving Minds Alliance this morning, an alliance focused on really ensuring that every child affected by crisis and conflict, every young child, has holistic development. She spoke this morning very passionately and helped us understand the situation of what it means to grow up in a war situation like Syria. 36 million children, is what she said, are not living to their dreams, are not being supported. And I think the role of parents is so crucial in these situations because they're the front line. They're the front line, and they're, I think, in these situations more often than not, live under a lot more stress than we have seen. Unfortunately, even though we have the evidence around the support and Ben made it very clear of like economic outcomes, etc., and it's a great investment. What we are not seeing is that in these situations that's supported. We see a lot of health, not that humanitarian responses are fully funded, but if they are, then it's in the health sector, it's in the nutrition sector, and not necessarily do we come together and really think about the role of parents. And I think one of the things that's needed is financing. That's not coming through, right? And so one of the things that the Lego Foundation can do is support countries who are struggling, caring for their own children and having a huge influx. So Venezuelan migration is a big one right now on everyone's radar. The Ukraine response, the Bangladesh, the Rohingya crisis. So there are elements where we can, I think, come in and support that. And the things that I think that I would say being part of the Lego ecosystem is that we believe in the power of play that not just helps young children, but I think helps parents equally to deal with stress, to deal with their emotions.
Could you tell us a little bit more in detail in terms of what that interventions are? Like you're saying, with parents because of stress, they're living in crisis conditions. This is a subset, very important subset that's growing, unfortunately. What would be those interventions precisely? Like when you say play, do you have any particular indicators that you want to track to see that whether you're making a success, whether you're actually having an impact on those parents? So I'm assuming that you want emotionally resilient parents who can handle these crises and manage these crises. So a little bit, just a couple of minutes telling us a little bit about what those interventions are.
Yeah, I just came back from Colombia and I was at the border of Venezuela watching learning from our partners that are working there in terms of what that can look like. And you see this, it just started that the bridge from Cucuta, from Venezuela to Cucuta was opened in September only after 2 years or 3 years of being closed. There's 30,000 people going every day from Venezuela over to Colombia. Many of them return, but they're going there for services primarily, or for buying food, etc. But many also, about 30%, are continuing their journey. Some of the programs that I was able to see is that there are information points on the way. I'm sure you've seen this now also in the Ukraine response. Information points that are helping parents to find out where can they sleep, where's the next bus stop, what rights do they have in their country, etc. We've been using, our partners have been using these spaces for play, where parents and children are coming together, where they've also received, because many of these families will continue to move, in discussion with families over the times of this migration, they've realized that giving a kid a small little backpack with some toys, with some tips for the parents, with some tips for siblings, because they're always, more often than not, you have older siblings walking with them as well. So you see that you can do it both in these shelters, in these information points. You can give information. You can have, when parents have to get, I don't know, legal information, you have a space where kids can play, where kids can be kids for a little while. You can equip them with a little backpack. They can move on. They have a toy to sleep with, often they have little things to play with, and that can help. So that's just one example
but also,
of what can happen.
But also with something that the kids and the parents can interact and play with, which is where the communication tends to become strained.
And in this case, I would say I've seen, it was really beautiful to just also have sessions where parents and children play together and be together and learn where to dream and what to take on the journey, etc. Right? So you do have that as well.
Thank you. Vina, Indonesia.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Tell us that you have everything sorted out and tell us how you did it.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good afternoon to the Minister and all the esteemed panels and all ladies and gentlemen. So let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Vina Adriani and currently I'm the Director of WCECCE. WCECCE is Southeast Asian Ministry of Education organization, and we are focusing as a center for early childhood care, education, and parenting. So we are part of the Ministry of Education in Indonesia, but we are also working closely with the Minister of Education organization in Southeast Asia. So talking about parenting in Indonesia, parenting program without any doubt plays very important roles in early childhood education care provision in the country. And the Indonesian government has developed the Ministry of Regulation number 30 year 2017 to indicate the importance of including parents and family in the educational setting. And after the pandemic, if there is one thing that we can learn from the pandemic is that there is a need for strong collaboration and strong partnership between early childhood education care provision and parents. So since 2020, the Indonesian government also makes it clear that one of the indicators of high quality early childhood education care is having a parenting program within the center. And I think there is also this growing awareness that when we are talking about parenting, parenting should be understood as a shared responsibility. So I think there is a need to work. I think I'm Indonesian, but there is a very famous African proverb used by many Indonesian people that it takes a village to raise a child, meaning that for young children to develop fully, there is a need for strong collaboration between parents, extended family, the society, and also the state. And the Indonesian government developed the law, the presidential regulation number 60 year 2030, and the law allows for the holistic and integrated approach to early childhood education care. And parenting is very much at the heart of the program. So this law allows the joint collaboration and also joint coordination between various ministries. So we have Ministry Education and Culture, we have Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Village, Ministry of Religious Affairs, Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs, and also they're all working under the ministry, the National Planning Agency. So I think it's the joint forces by several ministries or several sectors, I think allows the government to provide intervention even before the children are being given birth. So for example, under the Ministry of Health, the teenagers, normally the girls, teen, they have access to vitamins that will allow them to develop their reproductive right healthy in the future. And I also very much agree with what Nathan said about that. I think when we are talking about parents, we need to realize that when parents are not engaged in their parenting roles, sometimes it's not because they are bad parents. So I think that the joint forces also allow us to go beyond deficit models of parenting, that we need to understand some of the obstacles, some of the blockage faced by the parents. So for example, by having the Ministry of Social Affairs as part of the joint forces, it also allows them to provide cash transfer for some of the families, because very often poverty is the issue that prevents the parents to become a good parent. So I think in general, there are some of the things that have been conducted by the Indonesian government. Issues remain, problem remains. For example, Indonesia is a very multicultural country. We have more than 17,000 ethnicities. And when I'm talking about ethnicities, we are talking about people who have their own culture, speaking completely different languages. So I think there's also a need to develop culturally sensitive parenting models. And in Siameo Cecep, one of the programs that we are developing, we are trying to develop an ethno-parenting program. So it is a parenting program which is based on the local culture, because I think it is important that when you are dealing with a very diverse, multicultural society, you are not implementing what I call one-size-fits-all, because there is no one-size-fits-all. I think every program has always to be contextualized according to different contexts. And in Siameo Cecep, that's what we are trying to do in order to help the government.
So let me go ask a question to follow up there. In a sense, okay, multi-ethnicity, well, come to India and just 3 times as many as that. But as something that you want to evaluate, would you have a common indicator that you would cut across ethnicity, culture, that you want every parent to have?
I think it's always very difficult situation, but I think, again, in Siameo Cecep, when we are working with the government, first we are trying that all the models that we are developing is going beyond the deficit models of parenting. And there is also a strong, going back again to your earlier question, there is a strong emphasis on the social emotional learning. So we've been developing the mindful parenting program, which is basically encouraging parents to be more reflective with their parenting practices. And also in the ethno-parenting program that we are developing, we are really trying to dig into some of the best practices situated in their cultural practices. I think, some of the if we would like to use the term, the notion universality, though it is a very contested term in my opinion, but I think the idea of being responsive, emotionally present for the children, emotionally engaged, or being attached to the children are definitely some of the indicators that has to be there regardless of their
push you a bit. Would you challenge that the concept of kindness would differ across ethnicity and culture?
I wouldn't contest, but I think the notion of kindness, every notion is always culturally situated. So we need to understand within particular culture, what do they mean by kindness, what do they mean by being responsive. And if we can come sort of like an agreement of how that notion is being translated into different cultural contexts, I think we are all set.
It would have been great to have had a neuroscientist here to say, irrespective of that, it's the same neural network that gets activated, but I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't know. Okay, I'm going to open up to the floor, Q&A, because we are running. Do I have any direction from the organizers? Where am I? Hello, from time? All right, I've got 10 minutes. I'd like to give about 7 minutes to the floor, Q&A, and then I would like the panelists to say one take-home message. And then I would like to wrap up. I have a couple of things I think that cuts across all the discussions that we have had today. Q&A, if I don't see any hands, I'm going to move on. Oh, okay. Somebody's going to help me with that? I've been promised that I'll have help because I mess this up all the time. Okay. Let's start from my right, and then we'll move left. So, how would the panel like it? Do you want to collect a few and then have a stab at it, or
yes,
go one by one? A few? All right, we'll collect all on the first run. Maximum of 5.
Hi, you can hear me? Hi, Nafisa Shekhova with Aga Khan Foundation. I just wanted to clarify on 2 points. I think parents, I believe that panelists are looking at it a broader understanding of parents, because in our context with our partners, parents are broader. These are older siblings, these are nannies, these are grandparents. So one is if the comment can be made that sometimes parents are not just biological parents.
So it's not a question, but to tell us to broaden the concept of parents to caregivers.
Well, I'm just saying that that's hope that, because a lot of focus was on parents, and I just wanted, I understand that it's broader, but I just wanted to see that that's a comment.
All right.
And then the second one is the use of the health facilities. I mean, we know that a lot of children go to health facilities. How are we, particularly in the government, how are we looking at health facilities? This is an area that we've been looking a lot around promoting the play corners and training health workers. Question is if they can comment on their work, particularly from the ministries, around the use of health facilities.
Health facilities. Then we move. Quick, to the point.
Yes, I'm Evelyn Santiago from the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood. We did a quick mapping. There's a question after this. We did a quick mapping of parenting programs, and we're seeing a lot of gaps in terms of being siloed, because there are different entry points: health, nutrition, early learning, child protection. And we have heard, from Ms. Vina, in terms of the importance of getting, integrated and multi-sectoral coordination. My question is, what would be the best, approach in terms of addressing that silos and, the lack of, integration and coordination
How
amongst
do you
agencies?
get collaboration on the intersectorality? Eduardo will take, but hang on, Eduardo, because they wanted, you guys agreed that we'll take all of them, and then you will throw it at you.
Hi, Napat Pisanbut from UNESCO Thailand. I want to ask if you have any examples of promoting the engagement of fathers in parenting programs, because we often see just mothers.
Fathers.
Name country short.
Debbie, Uganda, Ministry of Education and Sports, National Curriculum Development Center. I am adding to what my colleague has just raised, that much as we are looking at the father engagement, what are some of these packages that can support the fathers to be encouraged to do the parenting? Two, I request the video which we watched, if the next one could show the father giving the response to the parent. Thank you.
Okay, bonjour. Moi, c'est une contribution que je veux faire par rapport au Mali. Ce n'est pas une question que je veux poser. Ça peut aller? On a une petite expérience par rapport à la parentalité.
I will give you 1 minute.
1 minute, hein? Donc, je veux dire qu'au Mali, on a une petite expérience par rapport à la parentalité, parce qu'on s'est dit que l'enfant n'est autre chose que le fruit de son milieu social. Donc, au partant de ce milieu social, on a élaboré un document qu'on a appelé le document d'éducation parentale. C'est un document qui est adressé aux familles, aux parents, que ce soit hommes ou femmes, et même tout l'environnement. Donc, à partir de ce document, on a élaboré une boîte à images qui fait la sensibilisation des communautés en des tranches d'âge, parce que l'enfant se développe par tranches d'âge et à chaque étape de développement correspondent des acquisitions. Donc, on a des étapes de 0-3 ans, de 3-6 ans et de 6-9 ans par rapport au document de politique que le Mali a élaboré. On a un document de politique sur la petite enfance. Donc, aux 0-3 ans déjà, nous prenons la prénatalité.
Unfortunately, the translation, did you guys get the translation? It was not, were you? Can somebody translate very quickly?
Élaboré avec l'appui technique et financier de l'UNICEF et puis de la Banque mondiale. Et puis, on a aussi un document qu'on a appelé Conseil à la famille pour la simulation et l'éveil du jeune enfant.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I can translate what she said. It's actually a guide for parents. That's a universal guide for parents, and to give practical advice to daily situations with children, young children, and to guide parents on how to to complete these activities.
Perfect.
Now that leads to my questions. Can I ask my question?
Oh, okay.
My name is Caroline and I work here. I work at Invento, the Uzbek International School. I hear a lot about, you presented, do I 2 minutes?
No. You have one question, straight.
So you talk about crisis. Now, there are a lot of problems, a lot of parents need supporting, even without any crisis, without poverty, without, we see a lot of parents who do not know what that means to be parents. And they are not poor, and they are not refugees, and so do you provide? Will there be material on your website, on GIST website about that? Yes. On Parental Skills 101?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Two more questions and then we're done. Oh la la. Okay.
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask a question which a child did ask me. And the question was, did you teach my mom how to care for me? Because my mom beats me, but my friend's mom doesn't. The question is, when should parenting start? We engage people in marriages, etc., but we don't orient them in parenting. We only do as after intervention. Is there something that we can do to formalize this?
Last question.
Got a perfect response for you, and I hope you will take it up in the declaration. Controversial, but I'll put it up.
Yes. Yeah, Professor Paul Hakizimana from Burundi, Director General of National Education. In Burundi, we have a challenge. In the situation...
Question.
Yeah. I'd like to request someone among participants to share with us experience how to develop or support parents in a rural zones, so that we can also develop pre-school education in that area. Because we note that this topic is developed.
So it is rural support. Don't you trust any of our
it is
panels?
different in cities or town.
I know, but you only said from the participants. You don't trust our panel to answer that because
Even
they
the
have
panel,
experience?
even
All
the
right. Okay, great.
panels.
Next, last question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry to be so crude, brutal.
Short.
Which one?
Good morning to you all. Marie-France from Seychelles, Director Program Coordination and Research. Actually, we did a study in Seychelles in terms of parental involvement.
Question.
And we've seen that they are thirsty to what extent that we can support the parents in the early learning needs of their child. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah, my name is Willetta. I work in comparative policy analysis. I really appreciated the speaker's comment on the need for cash transfers as a national level policy that is an enabling policy for some of these parenting things. I just want to raise, I haven't heard anyone talk about caregiving leave right after birth and how that can intersect and support these parenting interventions, and if that's something you talk about in other spaces. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You guys have all those questions because I don't. Eduardo, you had ants in your pants, so let's go with you.
I'm going to go for the first one, quick. In Brazil, we do also have the social development area working as center-based to receive parents, caregivers, to help them with the parenting, how to improve their parenting and to learn about parenting. I think health is also something that we use in Brazil, and education too, but social development is another area too.
All right, next goes to Anita. We'll just go down the row.
Yeah, I would also just add to, I think integrating, I think the best investment one can make when it comes to parenting, integrating it where parents are, right? So for me, or children in the case of, if it's health centers, when moms are coming for their pre or postnatal services with fathers, etc. There are moments where you can take great advantage of the situation where people are waiting, etc. I think those are really good places. I think schools and other are also places where you can do quite a bit, or child-friendly spaces, or child care services. I know of programs where they are bringing together, I'm thinking of Lebanon, where they have couple coaching, which I think is amazing, and it's evidence-based, right? And really that speaks to the broader piece of not just mothers, but also fathers, and a great way of...
So couples coaching, which includes the father as well. Nathan? Very quickly, because I'm going to be I was brutal with the participants, so I'm going to be brutal with you guys too.
So just to share one very concrete example that speaks to the health and parenting, and the gentleman from Burundi around the rural model as well. So the intervention called the Reach Up. So this is something that was developed in Jamaica over 30 years. It's now been trialed, adapted in about 10 other different countries around the world. It's having the evidence for Reach Up as a parenting program delivered through the health system in rural areas or urban is extremely strong. There's a website where has all the evidence and packages there. It's
all right.
Reach Up.
Reach Up. That's where you go and check.
Okay. Yeah,
Nina?
I'm just going to talk about the gender part. So
you can't talk about it, just make a statement.
Yeah, very briefly. So earlier I mentioned that there is a need to see parenting as a shared responsibility. And I think by seeing parenting as a shared responsibility, it allows us to see parenting in more inclusive and also gender-sensitive manner. So in our program, gender equality is very much heart of the program. We have a specific programs on fatherhood, trying to include fathers to be more involved in the parenting. Yeah.
Patricia?
Thanks so much. How do we use the health facilities to coach the mothers from conception, but also we encourage even fathers to join their wives when going to the hospital. And how do we encourage them? We take them as first priorities to be attended to when they come with their husbands. And also we work with the father, the male engagement from day one, that is through the hospital facilities from conception, even through the preschools. And the male engagement also help us in reducing the early marriages and early pregnancies, which we are talking about. And we also work, we have radio programs which we reach, we make sure that we go beyond hard to reach areas for parenting, thus engaging parents to train them, then how they can interact with their children. So all these programs which you talk about, we've put them in the programs on the radios, then we share all those radios in CBCCs. The CBCCs also are used as under 5 clinics where we coach the mothers of how to take care of their children. We also work with faith organizations. They've now joined the grouping of infrastructure in terms of ECDs. We work with a number of stakeholders, the Action Aid, the Lodja Federal, the Plan, World Vision, in also empowering the mothers as well. Okay. Economic empowerment of our women is so paramount as well in the rural areas. We don't even leave a stone unturned, be it rural as well as urban. We are looking forward to have, and we're having a number of schools of ECDs because there are those some urban, the urban and some other urban, we have people because of the immigration, some of them who cannot even make it to private sector. We enroll them in the public in schools. That's why we are working hand in hand with the private sector to make sure that we roll out even into the markets, the prisons, even the crowded areas. We need to have schools, the preschools.
Thank you.
And to what extent that we support the parents. That's the economic empowerment. And we also the ending of early marriages, because we parade the girl as well as boy into education. And we nullification of early marriages. And when we nullify these marriages, we send the children to school because we know the problems when a child is the mother. That's why we are experiencing all these problems. And we are making sure that when a mother wants to be a mother, it's supposed to be matured. And the starting point is 18 beyond, so that those are supposed to go into early marriages.
Perfect. I think that will address one of the questions of competency. Ben, I'm not sure whether I should give you, but anyway, 1 minute.
I was going to say that everything I'd want to say has already been answered.
Okay.
So I'm not going to add, but I'm going to just one thing. And thank you for the amazing contributions from colleagues running parenting programs in different parts of the world. We're going to have... It's on. Oh, okay. We're going to have... we're hoping to have next year a global summit on parenting or a major conference. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with all of you at that event.
All right, so Ben's contribution next year, Global Summit. I want to finish off.
1 minute or second, just to coordinate all of us who are here, the private sector, government, CSOs, NGOs, to make sure that we team up and do the financing, the construction, the coaching, and the advocacy of the ECD programs.
So, all right, based on that, I normally say I will never try to summarize, but today I am, because I think there was a really clear line of thought and thread going through, and I have 5 points. The first one is, and I think this is really important and even goes to what the minister said at the last, is this intersectorality coordination, just not among the ministries, but also across all the different partners. Now, I think it's important that that's, because apparently that seems to be fragmented in many, many countries. Some do it better, but most of them don't. So something that needs to be put such that there is accountability, responsibility at the end of the day, and indicators to say, have you done your part or not? No. And I think that's something that came out very, very strongly. The second is with Ben's is science and evidence. I think that's really important. I know RCTs are very expensive, but I think this is where some of the foundations and some of the others can support. So science and evidence really makes a strong case, of course, including economics. I really don't like economics as an economist, but that's what policymakers tend to listen to. The third is the social and emotional learning, which is key for both parents as well as the community. Because otherwise you get one, and then the other way, the others don't, and then you get into this situation of a prisoner's dilemma kind of stuff. So social emotional is really important as part of that whole package. Now the fourth is this outreach for caregivers, and to sort of say parents, no, caregivers. So you include, I'm hoping to be a grandfather soon, so no, not yet, she hasn't done it yet. But I'm hoping, one has to hope in these days, but caregivers, because the minute the one pops up, I'm going to go and grab that child and do what I wanted to do with mine. So I think caregivers was a great point. And then the fifth one is the one I think is interesting, is maybe a certificate of competency that you need to get before you become a parent. So if you want to become a parent, you got to go and get this certificate. Because if I'm given a certificate now after 3 kids, I think I'll fail it. Because it's like trial and error, isn't it? And it's so dangerous because these are kids. We are molding their brains, their minds, and it's all trial and error. The first one gets the brunt of it. The second one may be a little bit better. And the third one, you're just tired, to hell with it. And they just evolve. So I think that's something that should be. If you want to be a parent, you got to be responsible. So go get this competency, so the universal guidelines on being a parent, but make it such that they really do it, and it just doesn't become an academic exercise. Thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists. Please give a round of applause to a great panelist. Thank you.
Just 2 quick announcements. One, lunch is ready, and the next session starts at 2:30. Come to ours, 2.1 if you would like. And I'd invite the panelists to take a photograph. And then any governments that want to champion parenting, I would invite you afterwards to also take a photograph with us. So if you can just stay for 2 minutes, we'd welcome that. So first with the panelists, let's take a photograph. And now, please stay. Can I invite governments who support parenting to join us on stage? Minister, Honorable Minister, please, we need you. Please. Please, any other governments in the room, please join us on stage. Please join us. Please join us. Please. If you would like a card, I can hold it if you want. Merci, merci. Merci beaucoup. Any other governments, please join here. Please. Can you take a photo? Thank you so much. The future champions of parenting. See you at the Global Summit in 2023. Thanks.
So now, well. Now everyone can go.